We're back with the Yama and ready to talk some Irish football. We've got finally, we know, I guess, the postseason plans. Jamie didn't quite end like we'd all hoped. You know, after Baylor won and beat Oklahoma State, I really felt like they were getting in. I mean, I felt like this is it. They finally, got over the hump. The everything is lining up just like you'd hoped. And then, man, it just one after another, all the dominoes fell against Notre Dame, and it's it's a tough situation. But what can you do? You just gotta, I guess, deal with your fate. There's just not much else you can do at this point, and hopefully, it'll be a nice win and kind of a kickoff to what's coming here for 2022. Your thoughts?
Yeah, and obviously too, there was the good start for Georgia had an early lead, and Houston was hanging with Cincinnati, so you kind of thought it was going to turn out the way. But I mean, there's nothing you can do, and when it comes down to it, they played Cincinnati, and I know they're a much different team than when, but they lost head to head, and ultimately, like you go back to that game, and that was it. But I don't know. I'm still excited about they're playing in New Year's Six Bowl. Oklahoma State. It's not like the sexiest matchup out there, but I think for Notre Dame fans, they prefer that rather than getting stuck with an Ohio State, or like something that you thought was like a really, really bad matchup. It's not to say that Oklahoma State isn't a good team. They certainly have a great defense. And they're going to present some issues for Notre Dame, but Fiesta Bowl kind of, a couple of bad tastes in their mouth. The last couple of Fiesta Bowls for Notre Dame, get a kind of chance to, got to get a chance to, kind of avenge some of that. And not that the players care, they're thinking about any of that, but a great way to start, Marcus Freeman's tenure.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I probably would have rather played Michigan State, but it doesn't surprise me that kind of got switched to the other bowl. I think that would have been a better matchup for Notre Dame as far as chance to win.
More fun traditional matchup.
Yeah, and I think Notre Dame just matches up well against that team, and I think they do all right. I still think that Notre Dame matches up well against Oklahoma State as well. We saw yesterday what pressure can do to their quarterback, and I think Notre Dame will have a good opportunity to present a lot of pressure and get after this guy. And so we'll see. I mean, I think we've all said for a while the Big 12 is a weak conference. Well, we're going to find out because I do think this is the best team in the Big 12. I think despite Baylor winning, I think if Oklahoma State didn't have so many mistakes, they probably would have won the game. But that just didn't happen. And so, but I do think Oklahoma State's a pretty good team, and they got a good defense, and it'll be a good challenge for Notre Dame. And I think it'll be a good challenge for Notre Dame's offense, Jamie, to see did they actually make progress, or was this just a situation where they were beating up on some pretty bad defenses? So that matchup is what I'm most excited to see is can Tommy Rees and this Irish team kind of take what they've learned and what they, the momentum they've created and now somehow, put that into a good showing against what a lot of people consider a really good defense in Oklahoma State. So, your thoughts?
Yeah, and I think that's the way to kind of look at it is, the last great defense they played was Cincinnati, really, right? And they played Wisconsin and Cincinnati, two really like top 10 defenses in the country. Oklahoma State, another top 10, top 5 defense in the country. And now it's you get to kind of see that progress there, exactly like you said. Was that because they were playing bad defenses? And obviously, they're playing bad defenses, and they did what they should against bad defenses. But the assignment just got a lot tougher, right? Like you're looking at a team that they're first in the country in sack rate. Their 24% havoc rate. The Jim Knowles, the defensive coordinator formerly of Duke, he's known for blitzing a ton. They play like 40% man coverage, and you play that much in the Big 12. That's the kind of thing where you could get burned, but they really didn't get burned that much, right? So, they obviously use anyone who watched that Baylor game. They're a very physical team. a lot of really great production. I think they have like 5 guys on the team with over 10.5 tackles for loss. They lead the country in tackles for loss as well. It's just one of those teams and one of those defenses that it's you if you're going to be able to beat that man coverage, they couldn't do it against Cincinnati. Part of it was the quarterback and then the offensive line, and part of it was the receivers didn't do as well. And I think this is a perfect showcase for guys like Kevin Austin, for guys like Braden Lenzy, Lorenzo Styles. Certainly Michael Mayer is going to be, have a chance to have a big game and stuff. So, just looking at it from like the big picture view of it, I think, I would easily take Notre Dame in this game. But I think it's going to be a challenge, and I think that's what it's all going to come down to: how many points you can put on the board against this defense.
Looking at Oklahoma State, I kind of looked a little bit for maybe guys that were top draft picks and stuff that might sit out. I didn't really see anybody that I was like, yeah, that's that guy might not play. So do you anticipate we'll see their full roster to compete against?
I would imagine most
Yeah.
of the guys. I don't think they definitely don't have anyone who's projected as a first round pick
Yeah.
or anything like that. Sometimes you get guys out there, but I think for Oklahoma State too, you have to look at it like they're not in these games very often, right?
Yeah.
I think they were in the Fiesta Bowl. They played Stanford that one year. I can't remember if that was a Shaw or Harbaugh year, but it was either early Shaw or late Harbaugh, where they played, and they almost made when it was just the BCS still. That was a good team, but they haven't been really in these kind of games that often. So I think they're going to take full advantage. I imagine that their fans are really going to come out for this game. I think it's a big game for them, and they're going to treat it as such. So, really the only guy that you would kind of consider too for Notre Dame that might sit out would be Kyle Hamilton. And obviously they just played 6 games without him. So, I think for the most part, it's going to be a full deck for both teams, and I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, I think I think you're right in that the Fiesta's got to be pretty happy with the situation because, again, Oklahoma State's not a team that gets there very often in these kind of bowl games, and to play a team like Notre Dame, they're going to show up, and Irish fans are going to show up in droves. They can't wait to
Yeah.
watch the first game of Marcus Freeman, and even myself, I even somewhat considered it, going, you know what, maybe I should go
Yeah.
down there. And that never happens. You know what I mean? You know me; I can't stand to
Yeah.
go to those types of games. So I'd much rather watch it at home. But I think Notre Dame will win the game. But I think it'll be tougher than some people think. This is not a bad Oklahoma State team. I don't think offensively they're near as good as they have been in the past. But I think their defense is quite better than it has in the past, and they got some dudes too. They're not a small team. Watched them yesterday. They got some D linemen that are pretty good sized, and so it should be a pretty good challenge. They really didn't run the ball well, but they didn't have their starting running back last week, so that obviously has something to do with it. But I don't know. Just look at the matchup real quick, Jamie. I mean, Notre Dame's offense versus this defense. Where do you think that they could have some success, and where do you think that there may be some problems for Notre Dame trying to match up against this defense?
Well, I think it's how they're going to handle pressure, and that's the one thing. If like Jack Cohn, we know the one reason why he's thrived in this thing is, he's had a lot of pressure against him, right? Like you play against Stanford, drops back about 40 times in the game. He only pressured 4 times in the game. Georgia Tech was probably the most he was pressured, and even that wasn't that much, right? So he hasn't had to deal with that a lot. So they're going to have to blitz. They're gonna blitz a ton. They're not. I doubt they're going to be. They played drop 8 against Oklahoma, but that's not how I expect them to play against Notre Dame. So you're going to see guys like Kyron Williams, Chris Tyree, you have to have big games because they're going to have to do a lot of blitz pickup. They got really good blitzing linebackers. And they with a lot of exotic pressure and stuff like that, they're going to have to deal with. So I think a lot of it is how that retooled offensive line, everybody, I know people are already asking in the comments about Blake Fisher, and we'll see, but that's another reason why too, it's, even though it's not a slam dunk that even if you're like, well, Blake Fisher should play and, he should play over Josh Lugg or however people want to parse it. But, for him to kind of walk in, this isn't a game that you want to kind of walk into when it's this kind of defense and all the kind of things you're going to do. So he's got to do a lot of prep, and everybody's got to do a lot of prep to get ready for this and what they're going to show. So I think, it's obviously going to be a lot on, the receivers kind of winning that those 50-50 battles. Like Kevin Austin, awesome down the stretch in those things. He's got to continue to be that, right? He's got to continue to be that, do that. Got to have like a lot of man beaters, from Tommy Reese and what he calls and the game he calls. And I think he's done a great job of that later on. But I mean, you're playing against a lot of teams that are having busts, and this team isn't going to have as many busts, right? So I think it's going to be a great challenge all around, really. For I think the one thing that I would say is I do think that Notre Dame, even though they're a good run defense, there's just not a lot of physical offensive lines in the Big 12. And I do think Notre Dame is going to have a chance to run the ball. And, obviously Kyron Williams is a special runner and a guy who can break a lot of tackles. So that would be an area where even if I think it might be a little bit tough and they're going to be hit and miss a little bit in the pass game, I think they might have some success running the ball.
Yeah, yeah. What about when you look at Notre Dame's defense versus their offense? What do you think of that matchup right now? And do you think Notre Dame's defense matches up well with them?
I think they do. They don't really they're kind of missing. They've always had that dynamic receiver.
Yeah, they don't really
And
have.
they don't really have it. I mean, Tay Martin, he's a fine player, but he's kind of their guy, and they don't have anybody else next to him. And he's not elite. He's a good player, but definitely not a guy that, in the mold of, the David Bells, the Josh Downs, the Drake Londons that Notre Dame has seen. Certainly not even, I wouldn't put him anywhere close to that category. Right. So, and then Jalen Warren is a good back, definitely a good back. I think he's third, and PFF has him third in the country in forced missed tackles. He's a load, right? I mean, I think he's like 5'8", he's like 215. He's like a bowling ball, right? And a tough guy to tackle, but they don't block that well. The whole line. I mean, everyone who watched the game saw it, and obviously, Baylor got after it on them, but that's the one thing, is that without him, they need him to be like a tackle breaker, because they just don't create a lot of big holes for him. Right.
Yeah.
And then the other thing is that Spencer Sanders he's mobile, he can move the football with his legs, do some of that, escape a little bit. But I mean, you'll just see he's not the most accurate guy, especially ball placement wise, because, a lot of those picks were tipped or whatever, but they weren't good passes.
Yeah.
Right? They weren't good passes. They were balls that were
Behind.
You wouldn't say it was on him, but they were incomplete no matter what. Right.
Yeah.
Like, they weren't good balls. And, he obviously threw a lot of picks. 7 of his 12 picks came against Baylor. So obviously Baylor had the formula. So, you can bet that I'm going to watch both of those Baylor games over again to kind of see what they did. But I just think he's pretty average at best. Like, when he's good, he's okay, but he's just not a guy that's going to dice you up. And with what they do and what they show, I think Notre Dame's D-line is going to eat all day on them. I think they're going to win the battle of the line of scrimmage. And because they don't have that dynamic presence at receiver or tight end, I just don't see them. I don't see them scoring a lot of points or putting up a lot of yards on Notre Dame. So I think it really, for Oklahoma State to win the game, they kind of need to create turnovers and get great field position and play that kind of game, because I just don't see them scoring a lot of points against Notre Dame's defense.
It's interesting because I was thinking about who is a team that Notre Dame has played recently that Oklahoma State kind of resembles, and I was really kind of struggling trying to figure out anybody. I mean, it's kind of like a Wisconsin, but I don't think their defense is as good as Wisconsin. I think their offense is roughly similar, except they have a mobile quarterback versus kind of a passing quarterback. But, they don't, kind of like Wisconsin, they don't have a lot of, threats at tight end and wide receiver. Their quarterback's just kind of an average thrower. They run the ball, but can they really run it against a good defense? And so, to me, it was almost like Wisconsin, but I just don't think that they have the same quality of defense. But, after watching the Iowa game and with Wisconsin, who knows how good Wisconsin is either. So I was just trying to think of who would, we could kind of compare him to, but that was the closest I came with. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think they're a little bit different schematically on
Yeah,
offense, but
definitely.
I think it's a good comparison in terms of like them being obviously the defense has carried them, right?
Yeah.
And I think if you put them up against Wisconsin's schedule, I think they'd have the same record as Wisconsin.
Hmm.
I really think the Big 12 is bad. Um, and I think that, I mean, I don't know. Like, I thought yesterday's Big 12 championship game was a bad game. Like, I mean, we can talk, it was close at the end, it was exciting and all that, but I mean, that was an ugly football game. It was
Yeah.
ugly football. And I just don't think they play good football in the Big 12, right? Like, it's been a while, and especially because, Oklahoma was down this year and Texas has been down forever, right? So, and when those teams are doing that, I just don't think there's a lot of good football. I think that's why too. Even if Oklahoma State won that game, I don't think they were getting in the playoff. Like I take Cincinnati over them all day.
Yeah. Yeah, no question about it. All right, well, we're going to get into some questions from ISD customers or YouTube Live customers here in a second. But before I did, I wanted to mention once again, if you're not a member of irishsportsdaily.com, you can go to the front page of irishsportsdaily.com. There's a subscription top or piece up there at the top. Just click on that, and you can sign up. Right now, we're still running $1. If you've never been a member of Irish Sports Daily, you can sign up for $1 and get a week of coverage just to see if you like, or it's $9.99 a month or $99.95 or whatever a year. So great time to sign up. Things are going to get exciting here. We'll see what happens with coaches after the game, and whether there's some coaching changes. There's recruiting to finish up here next week, and then signing day is the 15th. We've got the Under Armour game. We've got the Army All-American game. Spring football is just right around the corner. Of course, we have winter lifting, all that kind of stuff to get excited about. And Marcus Freeman's first kind of go around with the team and see how it goes. Before we get into questions, and just to let everybody know, if you have questions, please type question before the question you have, so we know that that's something you'd like us to answer or address. In the chat comments there. So we'll get to the questions here in a second. But Jamie, first couple days for Marcus Freeman, kind of doing the interview route. I saw him on game day yesterday, and he looked tired. Man, that looked like a guy who needed a nap bad. And then I
Yeah,
watched him today, and he was a little bit more sprite today and exciting, but still not kind of the guy that we know. Kind of
yeah,
when he does his interviews. I think that'll come. I think right now he's just being real reserved and cautious to try and put the best image he can. But I think the best image he can is just to be himself, and I think we'll see that come out here more and more as this goes on. Guy's 35 and brand new head coach. I don't think that they probably let him talk much at Cincinnati. As far as
no,
interviews, and same thing here at Notre Dame. Only a couple times did he really get a chance to address the media since being here. So we'll have to see how that. But I mean, what did you think overall? Just kind of his media performances and everything. Thumbs up.
yeah. Thumbs up from me. I thought, like you said, he wasn't as engaging as I had a chance to interview him in the summer, and it was like a great conversation. And
Yeah,
he had gave a lot of interviews in the summer and spoke in the spring, and you could tell there was a little bit more pep in his step. But it was a long season, and he mentioned that that kind of wait in between him being able to see the players and all that stuff going on, and that felt like years, right? Because he
yeah,
couldn't even come in and hug his players and hug his guys, right?
yeah,
And so you could tell like it weighed on him, and he's a lot. And meanwhile, he's doing all this stuff and negotiating a contract and figuring all this stuff out, figuring out if he's going to be the guy and all that. And he's still recruiting his butt off. Like they
yeah,
have to like keep all these guys in the class and try to do it. So I mean, he's got a lot going on right now. And I mean, considering that he's juggling all of these things at once, I mean, I think he's doing I thought he did fantastic. And
yeah,
I think you'll see more and more I don't know about you, Mike, too, but I always thought like the whole Brian Kelly going on, SVP and Dan Patrick, those were seemed to his like kind of go tos that he would go on,
Yeah.
and not that he's always fine, right, and he's always engaging, and we know that Brian Kelly can turn it on and put on a show in those situations, but I personally, just as someone as an observer of the program, I don't care about any of that stuff. Like I don't think that kind of stuff. I think it means very little in helping when it comes to recruiting and putting a face on the program and all that. I think I'd much rather not do any of that stuff and then just, go dark. He did this stuff right now. He doesn't have to, don't do any more interviews until signing that first signing period. And then you can go off from there. Right. But like, and his regular press conferences that he does for, I know he's going to do one probably here pretty soon for the local media. Right. I'm sure. But outside of that, like, stop just worrying about the recruiting, worry about finish off the class, get, get in on that stuff, nail in on that. And then Oklahoma State, obviously too. Because I mean, the guys still got a lot of work to do. Like you said, like, what's going to happen with the staff and all that. Those are like big questions. There's a lot of stuff going on here in the next like few weeks.
Really is, and I agree with you. There's no point in going on Colin Coward and all these other places. I'm sure he will go on some, especially on Monday after being announced. I'm sure that a lot of places will be trying to get him on and talk to him and things like that. And I'm okay with it to a certain extent, but like you said, I mean, guys got to be on the road, man. Got to be out recruiting and those types of things, and so those opportunities to do those interviews. They're there all throughout the year. Colin Coward will talk to you February 12th if you want him to. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So there's plenty of time to kind of sell your program and what you're doing and get some publicity, especially in some downtime. When things aren't as exciting. So I like that plan. That's what I would do as well. And you gotta secure these guys, but. Jamie, the other thing, and this is what people don't realize in coaching searches, is it's not just about the guys that you're recruiting right now for this class. In the month of December and January, there are a whole lot of relationships that are developed for the next class because you're stopping at schools. If you happen to have somebody in LA, say CJ Williams, that you go out and talk to. Well, if you're in LA, you're going to stop at 3 or 4 other places, just because there's great players around there. So these are opportunities that are missed when you don't have a head coach. And it really impacts kind of your 2023, 2024 recruiting when you can't get out there because there's only so many opportunities to get out there. And so it's important for him to get out on the road and go meet a bunch of people. It's something Brian Kelly didn't really enjoy. I think Kelly wanted to go and do his interview with CJ Williams and then, go find the golf course or the latest watering hole or whatever the case may be. He didn't enjoy kind of going into, the high schools and being the big guy and things like that. And that's fine. We're not going to sit here and bag on him.
Maybe like 20 years ago, maybe he did enjoy that, right?
Yeah,
but
yeah,
when
yeah.
you're in the game this long, maybe that was part of the thing, right?
Well, yeah, exactly. And it's funny because I know like when Kelly goes out on these visits, he usually takes a staff member with him, and that staff member is basically the buffer. You know what I mean? He's the guy that when somebody's talking to him for too long, that guy will come in and just kind of interrupt that conversation and we got a phone call, we got a, you know what I mean, there's a buffer, so that's just because people will want to talk to you forever. So but with Marcus Freeman, I think he's going to enjoy that a little bit more and be more proactive in doing that. We'll see how much he can do that this year because of all the other responsibilities that he's going to have to kind of tie up. But I think a lot of this stuff's going to be addressed later. A lot of fans are like, well, who's going to be the new ex-coach? And it's like, well, they still have to coach the bowl game. They can't just fire everybody that they aren't going to keep. They need coaches to coach the bowl game. So I think most of the people are going to stay, as we discussed, but there's probably some positions up in the air. Those will have to be addressed after the bowl game. staff positions, as far as administrative staff positions, all that stuff will be addressed. I'm sure there's been a lot of discussion between Swarbrick and Marcus Freeman about, hey, we need to do this and this and this and this, and I think that, as I mentioned before on the show, I think part of that was one of the reasons Kelly left was, there were things that were supposed to be done that just weren't quite done yet due to COVID. And I'm sure Marcus Freeman's going to say, hey, when are we going to get this done? I know it's not happening in the timeline that Brian Kelly thought it would or should because of COVID, but when are we going to be able to get this done? So all that stuff needs to be addressed, and I think far more important than talking to Colin Coward. So
Yeah, definitely.
it just is what it is. All right, well, let's get to some questions. Question: do you feel like we went from the family truckster to a brand new Lincoln Continental? I truly believe Notre Dame's best days are ahead. We have a guy who wants to be here. I think that last part is a huge part of it. A guy who really does want to be here, and I don't think Kelly really ever did for the most part. Thoughts on that, Jamie?
Well, I think it may be a little bit harsh to say the family truckster to Robert because Brian Kelly did ultimately do a pretty good job at Notre Dame, and obviously the last 5 years won a ton of games, right? And they made the playoff 2 out of 3 years, and he was here. They ended up top 5 in the end of regular season. Like, he obviously accomplished quite a bit. Didn't finish the job, but he accomplished quite a bit. But I mean, you could just tell by the reaction of all the fans. People are excited, like very excited,
Oh yeah.
very excited, and not just the Notre Dame fans' reaction, but the reaction of like random college football fans who are like, "Man, I hated Brian Kelly. Now I like this guy. I like Marcus Freeman." Like, there's
Yeah.
a lot of that going on
Oh yeah.
right now, right? And they're like, you see people that normally hate Notre Dame sharing that video of him greeting the team for the first time, and being saying, "I got the chills watching this." And I mean, these are the people who just despised Notre Dame and despise Brian Kelly. So, and then you just see all these people kind of dunking on Brian Kelly for his, fake Southern accent and all this kind of stuff. And so, I think that, with considering all that has happened and kind of how people viewed, you kind of realize that Brian Kelly, like, there's people who always love to hate Notre Dame, but Brian Kelly kind of made it easier for these people to hate. And I think because, you got a young, exciting guy like Marcus Freeman, people are going to root for him to do well. They're going to root for him to do well. And I think that matters. So I think that is good. And I think, I think we'll have to see how it plays out on the field, but I think he's going to obviously hit a home run recruiting and, finish this class the way it should be in a pretty exciting way too.
Yeah. Yeah. Excited to see how it all unfolds, but I think you're right. There's a large amount of people who just really didn't like Brian Kelly that weren't even Notre Dame fans, and I had a lot of my Husker fans actually, talk about that introductory, kind of situation and how cool that was and everything. And so people are noticing, just even fans that aren't Notre Dame fans are noticing that. So I got to figure, if I'm a recruit and I see that, I'd be like, yeah, obviously these guys really like him, and I think that that's a great image. I think, we mentioned before on Irish Sports Daily, I think Notre Dame media did a tremendous job of capturing all the right things that you want to capture and putting it out there. I think that there are colleagues and everything, those guys, and we've been critical of them in the past. It seemed kind of like a nickel and dime type of thing for a long time, but they've really ramped up their game, very, very professionally done, and I think that I'm shocked at how well they did as far as present this to America and present this to everybody out there watching. I thought it was a fantastic job, and those guys really need to be applauded. I really thought they did a great job.
Yeah, just completely echo that. I thought they just in general, I'll tout our own guys too. Obviously, did a great job at
Oh, there's
ISU.
no doubt about that. Yeah,
Yeah,
our guys did a fantastic
yeah,
job. Yeah, there's no question. it was a lot of fun to follow, no question. Next question for you or for us is question: do you think Marist or Blake will play? I don't think Blake or Marist will, but the Blake question is interesting. And then it's do you play him? And if you do play him, where would you play him, Jamie?
Well, I think you play him at tackle. If you play him, and probably not. I really don't know. A lot depends. I think we talked about this on earlier shows where Josh Lugg's health that plays into it, because I think he's been playing hurt for quite a while. So if he's really playing hurt, and that's kind of an option where you look at for him to play, right? And so I think you got to kind of play it by that. But like I was mentioning earlier, this isn't a matchup where you just want to throw him in. He's got to be there, and not just physically ready, but he's got to be mentally sharp, because this isn't the game to kind of rotate offensive linemen, because they're going to throw a ton at these players. And obviously physically, Blake, I think he can handle, any other D lineman one-on-one. That's not a problem, right? But it's all of a sudden, you see a look that maybe, for a guy who hasn't really practiced that much, and you're going to have to get thrown into that situation, you're going to see this type of pressure that you haven't seen for a while, or that you haven't had to kind of deal with, really all year, because he missed the entire year. That's the kind of bigger question. The one thing about Maris, not that I expect him to play at all, but I do notice in those Matt Bailiff's videos that he's right at the front, and obviously, no cast or anything like that. He's out and, up at the front, looks pretty good. Obviously, we don't see him running or anything like that, but
Yeah.
That's always a good sign. So
Yeah.
good to see that from him.
Yeah, could he possibly play? It's certainly possible, but I don't know why you would at this point.
No.
With Blake, I could get it because he's played some, and you got a guy that's hurt and Lug. Although I would think that with the time off, resting, that'll help Lug a little bit. Kind of get his back together, but they're going to start practicing right away. It's January 1st isn't that far. So I expect this week they'll probably not do a whole lot and then start towards the weekend, and then you'll see it kind of ramp up and go from there. Next question. Anything new or anything to share in regards to recruiting and the rumored visits for next weekend? Thanks. Well, we do know that they're trying to get a bunch of guys in for visits, and obviously I think they'd like to have all the committed guys coming, but it's, can your parents get off to do that? And that's always a question, but I'm sure they're going to do their best to get everybody. We've talked to a number of the recruits who've said, yeah, they're trying to get there and make it work. As far as new people, I think the only guy would be that safety in Michigan, probably, I think, unless they were somehow to talk to, some wide receiver or something. But I would guess the safety in Michigan, I forgot his name off the top of my head. Jamie, do you remember?
Oh gosh, I'm blanking on his name
Yeah,
too right now.
I just totally blanked on it. And then, we have, they may circle back to Wesley or something like that at wide receiver. But I haven't heard that either of those guys are coming. But I think Notre Dame is going up there to visit the safety this week. And my guess is to offer him and then also to try and get him to come for an official visit. So I don't think you'll see a bunch of new names or anything like that. Maybe one or two. But the big thing is just get everybody around each other, feel the family, feel what is going on, and I think that'll solidify some things. And then can you get Billy Strout to come back? I think that would be huge to get him to come back on campus and kind of be around everything and see what happens there. Anything you want to add?
No, I think it's, I would imagine that even for the new guys that might pop up, I think that would almost be like after this early signing date. Like that's what I think. Especially if there are coaching changes after the bowl game, where you could see somebody, maybe who someone has a previous relationship with someone, or because there's still a lot going on with Oklahoma with their job, and Miami, who knows what's happening with Mario Cristobal, whatever. there's going to be some guys out there that don't sign in December. And
Well, like Cyrus
I
Moss.
mean,
I mean, what's he going to do? You know what I mean?
yeah,
If Cristobal bolts and half their team, I mean, think about it, this is a bad timing for Oregon right now. You
yes,
know,
really
their
terrible
signing
timing.
day is 10 days away. We won't even know what's going to happen, right? We really won't
Yeah.
even know until probably tomorrow for sure, which will be the 6th, you know? You're going to have a hard time getting everything wrapped up and your coach out there and talking to somebody. And unless you promote from within and your best, where a lot of people say arguably your best guy just took the Akron job. So who are you going to promote from within? I don't know. Maybe they do, but that's going to be a tough situation. Is it the defensive coordinator? Because I mean they're not very good defensively. So why would you
No, and
promote
it's a
that guy?
new guy there. Like,
Yeah,
I mean, you hear
yeah,
Chip Kelly coming back there and
good, yeah,
whatnot. And I mean, who knows? Who
yeah,
knows, right? Because I'm sure that up until, I mean, they're still trying to keep Cristobal, right? They're trying to,
yeah,
pay him what he wants and all that. So, I mean, and I don't even know how, like, Manny Diaz, obviously the guy's not going to walk away from the job, whatever, but like, I mean, I just can't imagine he's going to be able to sell Miami very well when they're openly trying to get somebody else and he still
yeah,
has a job, right? So,
yeah,
I mean, I think there's a lot of things. So I think finish up with these guys that are the critical guys that we mentioned. I mean, obviously, if they could close with Nwankpa and Shrouth, et cetera, like that would be fantastic. And then, get Devin Moore back in the fold, close out with CJ Williams and Amorian Walker. Like, to me, those are the most important guys on the board right now. And then, um, if something else comes up, it comes up, right? I'm obviously like Kari Gee last year. That came up like
yeah,
literally day of, right?
yeah.
So we'll see.
But here's the thing. Here's the thing that you don't want to do, Yama, is you don't want to just go find guys
No,
because
that's true.
look, they're going to get better guys next year anyway. I just think they
Don't
will.
just take anyone just to
Yeah,
take them.
yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, it's just like, look, let's just try and get who we can get. That we have committed. Let's not go out and try and beat the bushes on people we don't know a lot about. Unless it's a really spectacular player, because with Marcus Freeman and what I think will be a change in philosophy, a change in accountability. I think that you're going to get a better player next year than anybody you can get this year. So I just, don't waste a whole bunch of scholarships on guys that really can't help you, and or certainly can't help you as good as the players you'll probably get if you wait a little bit and go that route. So, all right. Next question. What do you think of Cincinnati? What do you think Cincinnati's record would be if they had to play Notre Dame's schedule? Interesting. What do you think?
Probably 12-0 or 11-1, to be
Yeah, yeah,
honest. Like, I mean, the way it turned out for Notre Dame's schedule, and this is actually probably the biggest reason why they didn't get in. The teams that were supposed to be good outside of Cincinnati, they weren't good, right?
yeah,
Like, even Wisconsin was fine, but like they weren't anywhere close to as projected as they would be,
yeah,
right? North Carolina was disappointing, USC was disappointing, Virginia Tech was disappointing, right? Like, I mean, and it just so happened that it worked out. Sometimes, like, like Georgia Tech would have ended it. Georgia Tech could have ended up being the Pitt or the Wake Forest this year, but they weren't. So because of that, in the ACC, they just ended up getting like a really easy ACC schedule. And Stanford sucked, right? Like, not even like a bowl team, right? So um, I think that's what hurt Notre Dame the most. It's obviously they dominated their November schedule, but like, can any of these teams even be half good? Like, they weren't, right? And it just was, and even Florida State kind of turned it on later, but they started out so bad. Like, there just wasn't anyone on the schedule that could really kind of help them and that were that great of a team. And I think if you put Cincinnati, yeah, maybe they slip up once or whatever, but I mean, talent for talent wise and team for team wise, I mean, I don't see them losing to these teams. I think if Cincinnati was in the ACC this year, they would have won the ACC.
yeah. No, I think so too. I think a lot of people are discounting Cincinnati. I think they're pretty good. I do think Notre Dame would beat them this if they played them again, but I think it'd be a pretty close game. It really would. They're a good football team. They just are. They really are a good football team. Are they one of the top 4 teams? I don't know. but they're certainly 6 or 7. I would think. They're really good. So we'll see. Next question: has there been any indications on what will become of Quinn in the O line coaching? Yeah, I would say. I mean, he hasn't come out and said, "Hey, I'm staying." He will be coaching, and he hasn't been fired. But when they went to visit Billy Strouth, he wasn't there. And if I were a betting man, I would say that says something, wouldn't you, Jamie?
Well, I think he did visit Tai Chan though, right? So it's not
Yeah.
like he's not out there.
Well, because they
But
have to
yeah,
have somebody. But I mean, for Billy
yeah,
Strouth, when you're trying to
I would think,
win
yeah,
somebody,
when you're
you
trying
would
to
think,
close the deal.
yeah, you would think he would
Um,
be there.
and I mean, you haven't heard from any of the guys that he has setting. Not that Jeff Quinn's not a big social media guy, so he's not going to be someone who's going to put out a graphic, on social media that, hey, I'm coming back, right? It's nothing like that. But no, none of the recruits have said anything like, "Oh yeah, Coach Quinn has told me that he's going back," and I think that says a lot, right?
Yeah.
Like, um, I would imagine, he'll finish out the bowl game, but I would be very doubtful that he's back after that.
All right. This is a very good question. Sorry, it's not bowl related. If everything is going well with Freeman and the Ohio State job opens up in 2 to 3 years, how concerned are you that Freeman would jump? I'll answer first. I think it all depends on where he's at Notre Dame at that point. If things are going really, really well at Notre Dame and you're recruiting well and things are trending in the right direction, I don't think he would go. But he may. Um, I just think that if he's the guy that we think he is, in 3 years, this program should be, one of the very top programs in the country. Now, Ohio State's still going to be that too, but if you're comfortable and you're happy and you like what you're doing and you like the people you're around, there's really no reason to leave. To me, I think Brian Kelly left because it was about money. More than anything, I think it was about money. Two, he didn't necessarily like the place. And three, it gave him an excuse as to why he never actually won a national championship at Notre Dame. He can say, "Well, I left because it was too hard to win there," and fine. If that's the case, that's fine. I think it's an excuse. I think he's been an excuse maker the whole time. I think he's done a really good job in a lot of ways, no question. But at the end of the day, I think that's why he left. And I'm not sure, I just think if Freeman does what he's supposed to do, the program should be in a really, really good situation, even if Ohio State came calling. What do you think, Jamie?
I think that's probably right. Like, if he's not going to do well and Ohio State won't want him, or he's going to do really well and have them in a position where, they're competing with Ohio State, and the decision to move, I don't think it'd be an easy one. Obviously, as proven by what happened with Brian Kelly and Lincoln Riley and what might happen with Marcus Ball, anything can happen, right? So to say that I don't think that he's going to go, I don't know. 3 years from now, maybe they drive a Brinks truck up to his house and he really wants to go. But I will say Ohio State, it's a pretty good problem to have when you have you got one alum who's now the head coach of Notre Dame. You got another one who's at Cincinnati in the college football playoff, right?
Yeah.
Undefeated. Um, is there any other program that has two alums with that high profile job? So I mean, I would think that I mean, that's the other thing. They might come for Freeman, but I mean, Fickle wants that job. Like,
Mm-hmm.
he's going to want that job, and so I mean, I don't necessarily think that even if things are going well for Freeman, that he would be the guy that they want. Like, Fickle was there for so long and has like deeper relationships with like Gene Smith and all of that too. So I would probably think he would be the guy that would be probably their first choice. And if you notice, I don't know if you noticed this, Mike, but I noticed this, that one of the only people that weren't like, saying, "Oh, what a great hire with Marcus Freeman," were Ohio State media, who were stumping for their guy Luke Fickell, they should have waited for Fickell because they love Fickell, right? So I would think Fickell would probably be, unless Cincinnati falls off a cliff, I don't see that happening. I would think Fickell would probably be, if it's 2 or 3 years from now, that he'd probably be their top choice.
I think it depends on whether Marcus Freeman is successful stealing players away from Ohio State and in the Midwest. If he's
Yeah.
recruiting well and doing as well as we think he will, I'm not sure Fickell will be the guy. I think if he's doing what we think he should do or what we're hoping that he'll do, and he does it at Notre Dame, I'd take that guy over Fickell every day. I really would. Harder job, harder academics, harder everything. And, if you can prove you can do it at Notre Dame, you can certainly do it at Ohio State. So that's just the way I would look at it. But again, that doesn't mean that he's going to leave by any means. It's a good question, though. This question here, if Cade McNamara never decommits, does Michigan still make it in the playoff? And does Notre Dame?
I don't think he's
He's a good player.
He's fine, but he's not like a difference maker. He's not all of a sudden coming to Notre Dame and they're in the playoff. He's the difference there to me. I think he's in the top 60 in pass efficiency. He's an athletic kid, obviously, but they play McCarthy and stuff too. It's not like he's the only guy for them, right? So I just don't think that I don't think he would be that much of a difference maker. Certainly a good player. It would have been nice if Notre Dame signed him. Obviously, I can't remember in that class. That might have been the Brendan Clark year. So I'm sure they would have taken Brendan Clark. They would have taken him over Brendan Clark. But at the same time, I don't think it's not like, where you get a situation where he is that much of a difference maker as compared to some of these other quarterbacks.
Sorry, I had a problem.
Apparently my hang on.
Oh, you can notice.
Yeah, apparently my audio was not very good and the thing was not plugged in properly. So you were getting my camera audio. I apologize. Okay. Thanks, Mr. Freed, for telling me that. I appreciate that. Sometimes you just never know. I leave this stuff hook up all the time, and sometimes it just doesn't. Hang on. Let's see if we got some more questions, folks. If you have more questions, feel free to put them in the chat, and we'll go ahead and answer them. There isn't a whole lot right now, so if you do have some, feel free to type them in there, and we'll answer your questions. Hang on. We got one here. Let's see. I don't know what the heck that is. That didn't look like much of a question for us. Well, Jamie, we don't have really any other questions. So wanted to mention, if you're not a fan of, we also do our podcast that happens called Irish Sports Daily Power Hour. If you just want to listen to an audio version of Jamie and I talking, we'll be on tomorrow. We'll upload our latest podcast and we'll be discussing this game a little bit more and that type of thing. Jamie, when you think about, if you're Marcus Freeman right now, what do you think are the priorities for you that you want to get through these next couple weeks? The things that are most important to kind of nail down at this point.
I think it's getting them focused on the task at hand, right? Turning all of the kind of, the kids being upset and all the things that's going on, but turning that into focus where they're putting it all into beating Oklahoma State, right? Like, get back on the grind, get back into game mode. This is the task at hand, and do that. I won't say that's first and foremost, because I think first and foremost is recruiting, right? And I really do think that, finishing off this class, making sure that they get those guys locked down, all the guys that I mentioned before, right? Like, that's that's the most important thing, right? Get those guys. If they are able to, like, I mean, Iowa, if Xavier Nwankpa goes to Iowa, I get it. It's the home school. But Iowa, like, has he watched them play football? It's bad football. Like,
It is.
they play bad football, right? And obviously they play hard on defense, whatever, right? But, like, that's a guy who is, he can be a primetime player at a big time school. And like, if he went to Ohio State, I mean, that wouldn't be good for Notre Dame, but you could understand it. But Iowa, like, that's one that, you hope that he can pull out. And if that's the first big win for, Marcus Freeman in recruiting, that would be massive, right? So to me, it's recruiting, finishing off, getting all these guys in that are supposed to be in. Kind of like, I think the other thing is there's guys on the roster right now too that, and it's not always like really out there, but there's guys who are always unhappy at the end of the year based on how their season went and how maybe things went with their position coach or whatnot, or and so forth. And he has to go and meet with these kids, manage that. And some of that will happen, after the bowl game, but some of that has to happen now because there are guys who might be looking to get in the portal, like, before they get to that. So I think certainly that too. So managing the roster, getting them ready for that stuff is equally important as just a thing, because you don't want to lose somebody who could be, a important piece for you, not just next year, but the years to come too.
Yeah. You definitely need to be all over your roster right now and making sure that everybody understands that, it's kind of a clean slate for everybody. You're now the head coach, people's opinions about things, are going to change. And so I think that that's really important, that, not just to try and get the guys back who may go to the NFL, but other guys who may felt like they didn't have much of an opportunity. Now you can approach them and say, hey, we're going to approach this completely different. And, you will have an opportunity to at least show what you can do here. So, Ebenezer wanted to know, are the questions free? And yeah, the questions are free. I mean, we don't have Super Chat right now. A lot of people have asked me about it, and we've had it before. We'll have it again. YouTube's a really weird thing. You have to do everything. You can't speak to anybody. You can't, there's just nobody to contact. And they had a problem with, I think, my address, because my ID address is still my old South Bend address. I haven't got a new driver's license since I moved to Nebraska because COVID hit, and there was just no way to. I'm not going to go sit in a room with a bunch of people just to take a driver's test, and my license is valid. So I think that's the problem that they had, and so they shut it down. We'll put it together, but the questions are always going to be free. I mean, you can ask, and we're going to try and answer every question we can, and do the best job we can. So we're not charging anybody, to ask a question or anything like that, even if we do have Super Chat at some point. So, that's just, we wouldn't operate that way. Next question, Jake Taylor wavering at all on his OU commitment. I haven't really seen much. I don't think Notre Dame's really pursued it. I don't think, I think Trouth would be the guy. They're real close on him, and they won't have room for a Jake Taylor if they take Trouth. And so I think it makes a lot more sense trying to get Trouth locked in than it does trying to chase Jake Taylor. I
think Taylor, I read that he was locked in.
Yeah.
Oklahoma. And I think because one of the things, because he's a Bishop Gorman guy, DeMarco Murray, I think is still there. Probably, I assume, Brent Venables looks like he's going to get the job. I assume that, that's a guy you would probably want to keep. Obviously, he's an Oklahoma guy, probably that, you would want to keep around. And they've recruited Vegas and Bishop Gorman pretty well. And I think that was, one of the influences on him kind of sticking there. And like you said, to jump back in on that, what are the chances of you flipping him? Notre Dame's been out for him for a long time. So I doubt they kept contact with him. If it was something where they were pursuing this whole time, maybe that'd be different.
Yeah. And I don't think they were even second in that one. You know what I mean? So, I think he went to Notre Dame, and for whatever reason, it just wasn't something that he was overly interested in. Okay. And next question: will we see more Tyler Buckner due to Oklahoma State's front seven? What do you think there?
No, not more of him. I mean, not more of him than you would have seen in a regular game in the second half. Like, you're not going to see what you saw, like him, Virginia Tech, him being the guy in the game. I don't see that. And also, as much as people are like, well, get Tyler Buckner ready for Ohio State, so put him out there. You're not putting him in a position to succeed. You're not putting the team in a position to succeed against this defense. So put them in and use them for sure, and make them defend it and make them have to prepare for it. Hopefully expand on what you were doing with him, but I don't see him playing more than 15 snaps in a game.
Yeah. Question here: any chance they will recruit Xavier Bradshaw or Everhart? Well, first of all, I think Everhart is a lost cause. I think he liked the idea of Notre Dame, but then realized how far away that is. Distance was really the issue with that, and that doesn't change. Even though he lost his coach, there are a lot of opportunities down south where he'll. As far as Bradshaw, they just really haven't pushed that hard on that type of stuff. I think it's a deal where, Notre Dame's probably best opportunity is let's try and nail these three guys down, and if we can get them, then we won't deal with it. But if we don't, then maybe their best case scenario is trying to talk to somebody about, hey, don't sign. Don't sign. Let us recruit you because we'd really like to have you, and maybe they can talk somebody out of signing that they will be able to get the next go around on the second signing day. That would be my guess, because I don't know what else you would do at this point. You'd have to find somebody later. So I think that the focus is going to be, let's try and nail those three guys down the best we can. And then if it gets to the point where we don't think we're going to get one or two of them or whatever, then we'll have to address it. But I think that would make the most sense. And I'd be shocked if that's not what they're doing. Next question here. What are you hearing on fifth-year guys coming back? Well, again, I think it's a situation where we heard a lot of positive things. I mean, it seemed like almost everybody was coming back. And, and now we've heard things like Myron is thinking about coming back, and Lug is thinking about coming back. And so I think there's a lot of guys who would like to come back. And the interesting thing is that was under Brian Kelly, right? Will Marcus Freeman still feel that way about, I want all these guys back, or I don't? I don't know the answer to it. But the other thing that I think is kind of interesting here will be like the wide receivers, Jamie. A lot of us don't think that Dell will be back. Maybe he will be. If Dell isn't back, do those wide receivers go into the NFL because they're like, I don't even know who my coach is going to be, So they got to declare sometime early January. And so Notre Dame would have to have a wide receivers coach in place. And then, of course, they'd probably have to have some conversations. And again, this is if they replace Dell. If they don't replace Dell, none of this matters. But it may matter to, a guy like Kevin Austin, a guy like Braden Lenzy, even an Avery Davis, Do I want to coach, or do I want to come back and play for a guy I don't really know? So that could be one of the downsides of this. But I think it all depends on who's hired. But based off of everything I've heard, there's a lot of guys wanting to come back. And I think the naming of Marcus Freeman will only increase the likelihood of those guys coming back. The only questions I would see were at, say, wide receiver, maybe even O-line if Quinn goes. But the only guy that would matter would be Lug, and I don't think that Quinn being there or not would really have much of an impact on his decision one way or the other. So, anything you want to add?
Well, I think too, if you look at kind of where things are at with Notre Dame and the seniors that could potentially have that, super senior year, none of those guys really that I've seen have had like invites to all-star games yet. So chances to kind of showcase themselves there. And that's not a good sign for their draft stock, in general, right? For guys that are kind of, trying to just get drafted, not just be high picks, but just get drafted when you don't see them invited to those games. And they still could get invited. I think a lot of those guys, if you're not, you're not hearing what you want there, why wouldn't they want to come back and play in those situations? And I think, to kind of play the opposite of what you said, with say like Dell or whatever, there's always guys who are like, they want a new coach or they're looking for that new opportunity too. So I'm thinking it could go both ways, right? Where they could lose some people maybe because they, lost a coach, and maybe gain some other people back because they're like, well, now I have more, I think I have a better opportunity now because I didn't like, X coach or whatever before. So, I think that'll be kind of interesting to see how they play out. And I really, the roster management, and I think a lot of these guys are going to come back. I'm not sure all of them are going to be invited back.
Yeah.
Right. So
that's going to be the interesting thing. Who's invited back? So, and I don't know the answer to that. A lot of that stuff will be kind of dropping here probably this week, I'd guess. A lot of that we'll start hearing a little bit more about it. And then we'll see what happens. Next question. How do you guys think the 2023 quarterback recruiting situation is looking now? And then how does it eventually unfold? Thank you. Well, I think Moore is the guy right now, right? I mean, it seems like that's the guy that they're the most focused on. When I think about how it's all going to unfold, will they wait and try and come up with a guy? First of all, I don't think Nick Lama Lavea or whatever. I think that's a long shot. Arch Manning certainly a long shot. So really, I think it comes down to Dante Moore, Jackson Arnold, Avery Johnson, and maybe Chris Vezina. And Chris Vezina has said he's going to visit a number of times and hasn't shown up. Talked about how it was such a great offer, but never materialized. So I think if he wants to get in the game, he's going to have to get up to Notre Dame soon. I was talking to a person a couple weeks ago, and about the situation, and they said, well, Moore is obviously a guy they like a lot and would like to have, but is he going to wait too long before, are they going to feel comfortable waiting long enough for him to decide, or do they then go hard after a Jackson Arnold or an Avery Johnson? And I like all three of those guys. I think all three of them are really good prospects. I think, Dante Moore probably has a little bit more upside than the other two. But I think the other two are really, really talented players. And, I'd probably be happy with any of the three. What about you, Jamie?
I'd be happy with any of those three guys too. And I think they're all really intriguing athletes, right? And I think Steve Angeli will surprise some people as an athlete. Certainly he's not a statue in the pocket, that's for sure, right? But I definitely think I just think the way when it comes down to it, you want to have a dual threat. Especially because if you look at a guy like Bryce Young, who's probably only going to run when he really needs to, even though he could be like super dangerous if they used him all the time. They don't need to get him beat up, but then all of a sudden when he has to, he can be dynamic, right?
Yeah.
And I think just having that piece of it, I think is always just huge. And I really think, obviously, Jack Cohen has done a great job the second half of the season, but you miss that dynamic. That's the reason they have to play Buck, right? You want to have that dynamic. So, and I think all three of those guys can offer some of that dynamic.
All right. Next question. Who do you think sits in the Fiesta Bowl for both teams? We've kind of discussed this. I don't think, other than maybe Kyle Hamilton, I don't think any Notre Dame player will. And I just didn't see a lot of like real high draftable guys at Oklahoma State. So I doubt any of those guys would sit either, but I don't know those players very well. I'd just be surprised if anybody other than Hamilton sat at Notre Dame. Your thoughts?
That's exactly how I feel. I don't think anybody other than Hamilton would sit out. And I also wouldn't be shocked if Hamilton decided to play, even though I would probably lean that he's probably not going to play.
Yeah. All right, next question. Do you guys see Indy using the max of 8 transfer portal guys for the 2022 team? No, I mean, I don't see Notre Dame ever, admitting 8 guys from the transfer portal. I don't see that ever happening. I think Notre Dame will be lucky to get one that isn't a grad transfer. You know what I mean? I'd be very shocked if they got more than one every year. Just we've mentioned it many times. It's just really hard to transfer into Notre Dame, and that's a tough situation. So, anything you want to add?
Yeah, I think this year they as Kane Madden, Jack Cohn, right? Both grad transfers. Obviously, previous year, you get Isaiah Pryor, Nick McLeod, and there was a couple other guys that transferred in as well. And I just think that you're never going to get more than 3 or 4 tops in a year. And I think that a lot depends on who they bring back, right? And where that thing. But I would still think that if they're in terms of portal guys and probably grant transfers like we talked about, I would think DB would be an area that they'd look at.
Yeah, I think so too, and we'll see how it all unfolds. Wanted to mention once again, folks, if you're not a member of Irish Sports Daily, it's a great time to sign up. Just go to the front page of irishsportsdaily.com and click on the subscription section there and sign up. You can sign up for $1 for a week if you've never been a member, and check us out, or you can sign up for a month or a year. Love to have you. Come check us out and see what you think, and there'll be a lot of stuff to discuss here moving forward. Jamie, another question for you. Who's your best guess as far as the linebacker coach?
I mean, for this game, Nick Lazinski.
Yeah.
And I could easily see Nick Lazinski's obviously a guy who's paid his dues at Notre Dame. Like, I could easily see him being the linebacker coach next year. But I think I don't know. If you did that,
though, who would you name as DC? Because that's the hard part.
Well, that's the thing, and I don't think it's a slam dunk. I know everybody always thinks, "Oh, Mike Elston," right? But I don't think that's a slam dunk at all. So I think if that's the way you're going to look at it, chances are, unless they're going to promote someone like Mike Mickens, then that linebacker coach could be your next DC. So. And it depends too of what are they going to do if Polian's not there and how that's going to shape. And is that going to be an extra coach? I don't think they're going to bring in just a guy to coach special teams. So is that guy going to coach, inside linebackers and special or whatever,
and
right?
Special teams. Yeah.
There's a lot of different ways that it could play
unfold
out. So
yeah.
I don't really know. Like my best guess for right now would be Nick Lazinski. And then, that's something that, I've looked at a lot of like O-line and wide receiver coaches. I haven't dived into, who could be the next DC totally yet. Especially, because I imagine that would be a linebacker coach, but certainly, there are a couple Notre Dame guys out there that if they're just looking for, to fill something, can promote Blazinski, Tyler Stockton. I know he's a DC at Ball State, but I don't imagine he's going to be a DC at Notre Dame, but he could be maybe as a position coach. I think that's probably what a lot of guys want to do. Mo Crum is the DC at Western Kentucky. I think he would want to continue to be a DC. I don't believe he would just be a position coach at Notre Dame, but
never know.
I don't know, right?
Yeah.
You never know.
He'd probably make as much money,
I'd probably make more money.
Yeah,
right?
probably. So, yeah, I would guess. So, okay. We got a few more questions here, and then we're gonna call it. But I think that when you look at the situation, when you look at the way it's gonna unfold as far as the defensive coordinator position goes. Maybe Freeman just hasn't decided whether it's going to be Elston or not, because he really doesn't need to at this point. He doesn't need to decide anything. He already knows that he'll be coaching the defense for the rest of, this season, and then afterwards you can address it. So it may still be Elston. They may sit down and say, okay, well, here's, what I want to do. How would you run this defense? And, maybe they have that question or that conversation, or maybe he's already decided they're not going to do that. I don't know, but I think I think it's too premature to assume that Elston won't be the guy, because I don't think that he has to name anybody at this point. There's no hurry to do that. And so, I think a lot of this is going to happen after the season, whether they address an O-line situation or wide receiver or Polian's position, or I think a lot of that's just all going to happen at the end of the season. So, we got a few more questions here, and then we'll wrap it up here. Are you hearing anything about Jarrett Patterson returning? And we heard that he was very, very strongly considering returning. Has that changed? I don't know. But before Kelly's before Kelly's leaving, we were told that he was strongly considering coming back, and that also influenced Kyron Williams about thinking, oh, well, maybe I should come back. If you get essentially 4 linemen back, that's a good thing for any sort of running back looking to have a big season and potentially win a national championship. Another question, chance for a transfer portal quarterback for next year. We need a true difference maker. I've mentioned this before. I'd be shocked if they don't at least look. Is that Brennan Armstrong? Is that, who knows who it would be? They're going to certainly look. Will they get anybody? I don't know. But I do think Drew Pine's going to stick around based off of things we've heard. So, he'll be somebody to help for spring. But I'm sure they'll look at somebody and see what happens. But I think the transfer portal is going to heat up pretty quick here, Jamie. We're going to see a lot of names jumping in there real quick. Next question. Any thoughts on Chris Watt returning for O-line coach? I think we'd all be surprised if that happened as the actual offensive line coach. Maybe down the road at some day, but I think it's a little too early for that. What do you think, Jamie?
Yeah, I think he's really have 1 year of experience as a position coach running his own offensive line. I know there were those talks about him like running the O-line. That wasn't true. He didn't run the O-line before. So it's not like an easy step for him to just walk right back in and do it. I don't think so at this time, but I guess, it could be shocking that it happened, but I doubt it.
Yeah. All right. Question, you mentioned O-line coaches and wide receiver coaches. Do you think Quinn and Dell will not return next year? I don't know. The reason I think we're speculating is because, as we mentioned, Dell didn't go visit Billy Strouth when they're trying to wrap him up.
Or Quinn, yeah.
Or Quinn, I'm sorry, Quinn, which to me does not bode well for him. If I were Jeff Quinn, I'd be wondering why. And so I think that's part of it. That's kind of why we're thinking that way. And then also he didn't have his big announcement on Twitter, hey, I'm coming back. Same thing with Dell. We didn't see that like we did the other people. And I think that's by design, because I think that, they probably haven't made a decision on what they're going to do at those 2 positions yet. But Lance Taylor has said he's coming back. McNulty said he's coming back. And it's a situation where I think that the reason they said that is because they've already had conversations with, Marcus Freeman that, hey, we'd like to have you back. And so they know that they have a job at this point. So that's kind of what I have, or, my thoughts on it. And here's another one. Dell is still at ND and actively recruiting. And yeah, he is. He's employed. He hasn't been fired. And, he'll coach through the game. And then we'll see what happens after the game. I'm not trying to hint one way or the other and say he's definitely fired or he's definitely staying or anything. I just don't think we know that at this point. But, kind of reading the tea leaves, as we said, Jamie, neither one of those guys has come out and really done the same thing everybody else does, which to me makes me believe that there's, still some uncertainty surrounding it. Anything you want?
Yeah, at the very least, uncertainty, right?
Yeah.
Like, Yeah.
So I mean,
nothing
I think
should
a lot of people are expecting, okay, well, how come we're not hearing offensive line coaches' names? And again, you can't really strongly go out and pursue, you know, new
It's
coaches if you still have
disrespectful
guys
to
who are
those guys
employed.
too, right? I
Although
think
that's what
like
Miami seems to be doing.
I mean,
with
I was just
it.
gonna say that Miami's doing this with, yeah, but I mean, I think that also is more of like they're trying to really kind of like put it out
Push-
all on the table, try
Yeah.
to get back, create some buzz for the U and all
Oh,
that,
yeah,
and just
yeah.
want all that. So I think that has a lot to do with it. And it's a little bit different when it's the O-line coach at Notre Dame or the receivers coach or whatever coach at Notre Dame. But I think that, how you look at it with, I just think it would be completely unprofessional to just be like openly being like, if, they interviewed, such and such for the O-line job, while Quinn is still like, I don't know. That wouldn't sit right with me, but that's just me.
One more question, and then we'll call it good, Jamie. What players leave Notre Dame for LSU? I think the only one I would even be considered, even remotely concerned about, would be Logan Diggs. I think, but I don't think he would leave because of Brian Kelly, right? I think he would leave because there's a lot of players in front of him, and if Kyron Williams comes back, this is a guy who knows he can play at this level and wants to play. And if Kyron comes back, maybe that's a situation where he's like, I got to look at some other opportunities. And this is what's going to happen. I think it's crazy that they're letting guys transfer like this, but this is what's happening. And it's it's just crazy to think that so many of these guys can just be pulled away like it's nothing, And but to be honest, I think that the only guy that I would even be fearful of that would be Logan Diggs. Even though he's played a lot, he may just say, I want to go to a place where I'd be a feature back. And it was interesting because talking to the LSU guys, throughout this process, they actually think Logan Diggs may be their best back there if he transfers. So, who knows? I would be surprised if he did because things have been, very good for him and he seems happy and everything. But I think that would probably be the only player I would say there was even a remote chance of that happening. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah. I mean, I guess there could be another guy, not anyone who's set to start at Notre Dame, right? It would be somebody who's, that they're looking for a chance to start and LSU gave them a chance, right? Like, I don't think there's no one, I really, everyone saw the reaction of people to Marcus Freeman. People don't have that kind of reaction or that kind of loyalty to Brian Kelly in that way. So there's not going to be a guy who's like, well, Brian Kelly recruited me. I'm following him I don't see that happening at all. Like, people are loyal to Notre Dame. And so it would have to be a situation where, they were no longer viewed as, maybe they're one of the guys who wasn't asked back, and maybe one of those guys. But other than that, and like you said, Diggs, obviously the being home, that would be something there. But I mean, other than that, I can't see anybody.
All right, folks, that's going to be it. Thanks for watching. We'll have another YouTube Live here soon. We'll be announcing it on Irish Sports Daily. If you're not a member, please sign up. Give us a shot. There's going to be a lot of exciting stuff happening. Go click on the subscribe thing at irishsportsdaily.com. Thanks to the Yama for doing it once again, buddy. We're going to have a lot more crazy stuff coming soon. All right, Cordell wants to know Sex Pistols or Ramones. Sex Pistols' first album is better than anything the Ramones did, but the Ramones had far better, more songs. All right, how's that? All right, that's it. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate it. We'll talk to you soon on YouTube Live. What should we call it? ISD TV? I mean, we got what is it?
Well,
that has a nice ring.
We'll get Matt to come up with a good name for it.
I kind of liked ISD TV. You didn't like it?
I like that. I like that. Yeah.
All right. I don't think Yama really dug it too much.
No, I'm good with
just
it.
messing with you, dude. All right, well, we'll have more fun tomorrow on our podcast, and hopefully you listen to that as well. Thanks for listening, folks. We'll and watching. We'll talk to you real soon here on YouTube Live, ISD TV. Later.